Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to Adrian's Digital Basement. On today's video, it's an episode of PC Archeology, and we're going to be taking a look at this computer right here. This machine is known as the Altima Music Workstation. And from what I can tell by doing a little bit of research, it's an IBM PC AT compatible computer, and it was designed to help in music production. And it was designed to be obviously portable because this is one of those luggable form factors that was popular in the very late 80s into the early 90s. So what I want to do in this video is explore the inside and out of this machine and then see if it still works and see if there's any secrets lurking on the hard drive. So without further ado, let's get right to it. So the Altima Music Workstation, whatever life this particular computer had, it was very well used. There's a lot of scuffs and marks all over the machine that show that it was well loved. It has two buttons right here, which you can push to open up the LCD screen. And the spring mechanism on the screen, unfortunately, is a little worn out, so it doesn't really stay in any position other than the fully open position. On the front edge of the machine is a carry handle, and I have a feeling that originally this probably latched into position in that position right here, but it seems like the latch is worn out or broken. So unfortunately, it sort of flops around, but it is metal, so it's pretty sturdy and can carry the substantial weight of this machine. Now, along the top edge of the screen are the two hinges, and those actually latch into the keyboard right here. And the keyboard is actually removable. If you push the buttons on the side of the keyboard, it releases it, and then you can actually slide this into a few different positions, and it is still attached, but there is a one position right there where you can actually lift it up, and as you can see, it's got a coiled cord here. Now the coil is no longer tight anymore, and unfortunately the cable obviously is supposed to rest in this edge of the keyboard, but because it's sort of loose and not so tight anymore, you can't actually latch this all the way back in properly because the cord doesn't really fit in the small space they have here for it. We can imagine the idea would be is if you had this thing set up, you might need to pull the keyboard away so you could work on it at a bigger distance, but the weird thing is the screen is not very big, so it's not like I could see yourself sitting a few feet away from this small screen and actually being able to use the computer, but maybe they intended you to plug in an external monitor, which I think is possible with the ports on the side here, and then you can compute away without having to bring an extra keyboard to use with this machine. I'd say that this keyboard layout is a North American standard layout just by the fact that the enter key is like this and the backslash key is right here. We also just have standard control and alt keys here and here, so that just implies that this thing was definitely destined for the North American market, at least this exact computer. The keyboard feels pretty good to type on. It's probably rubber dome, but I think this computer is from around 1990, 1991 or so. Therefore, that would be sort of typical for that time frame. You can see some of the branding that's on this machine. We have Altima there, and then we have a sticker here that says Altima Two, so this would imply that this is a second generation of this machine. Power LED, 16 megahertz, floppy drive, hard drive LEDs, and then we have modem, data carrier detect, on hook, and SI, which I can't remember what that stands for. We also have Altima branding on the keyboard right there, along with a couple LEDs for numlock and the caps lock key right here. The keyboard cable is like an RJ45 or an RJ11. It looks like an RJ12 actually, and that is removable. Now the body of this computer does appear to be a sturdy metallized plastic. I think it's painted on the outside, probably has that metallic coating on the inside, and it's relatively sturdy, but also kind of flimsy at the same time. There are bits of metal all over the machine, like where the keyboard connects up, and this hinge mechanism is definitely metal as well. The keyboard is obviously an integral part of the machine. As I mentioned, the screen latches into it, but in addition, the screen actually rests on it. When the keyboard is missing, it's actually only resting on this edge of the case right here. So if you put any pressure on the top of the screen, it could potentially break it. Taking a look at the left side of the machine, starting at the back on the bottom, power switch, 25-pin connector. Then we have a VGA connector, that's a standard HD15, another DB25, DE9 for serial, some dip switches, a port labeled KB or keyboard, and I'm assuming a reset switch. It's an orange switch with an arrow pointing towards it. The back of the machine doesn't have a lot going on, but we have an IEC mains input, some kind of a multi-pin connector, and then we have a couple screw holes, one there and one right here. And it's my assumption there was probably some kind of a battery pack option or a backpack that would screw into the back of this, probably latch into this little structure here, and then plug into this port, giving this thing actual battery power. Because as it sits right now, this thing is only IEC mains input powered. On the right side of the machine, we have a floppy drive, and we have a phone and a line jack. This will be for the internal modem. On the top of the computer, there's not a whole lot on here. There isn't even any branding on the top lid whatsoever. That's very unlike laptops of today, which of course have their logo proudly displayed right in the middle for all to see. The bottom of the computer has an interesting design element where it has this slanted part right here. If you put this thing on your desk, it's resting on the feet right here and right here. So I'm not sure what this is all about. Although maybe there was a kind of stand, or maybe the thing that connected to the back here with the battery, maybe it went under the computer and actually held the computer at some kind of an angle, because there are feet on the top edge here, which would imply that at some point it would be resting on those feet. I just don't see how exactly. We have some type of expansion port cover here that it's held on by some Scotch tape, and we have the badge for the computer. So the Altima personal computer, model number Altima 2, there's the serial number, and there's the date, May 1990. This machine is made in Taiwan, but it does have an FCC ID here, so we're gonna have to look that up to see if we can figure out what company actually made this thing. And we do have a multi-voltage power supply, good for use from Japan all the way to 240 volt countries. Now, looking at the side of the computer, we can tell that this is a standard ISA expansion slot. It has the regular slot bracket on it, and we do have a flathead screw here, which probably has something to do with this bracket here that's holding in that card. We'll need to take this computer apart further to kind of figure out what exactly is going on in here. Another little design element is the keyboard, while it's removed from the computer, has little tilt-up feet here. They don't latch or anything like that, but I'm assuming you go into that position if you want a little tilt action with your keyboard. I kind of glossed over the fact that there's obviously a little cover as well on the top side. Why don't we pop this off, see what's inside. And we have 4 30-pin SIMs for easy RAM expansion. Cool. And let's take a look at what's in the bottom cover here. I'm just going to cut through the tape that's on here. Well, that just sort of comes off very easily. And the cover revealed very specifically dip switches on the ISA card. You can also notice here that this is only an 8-bit ISA slot, even though, as far as I'm aware, this is actually a 16-bit machine. It's a 286 running at 16 megahertz. And looking at the cover here, it used to have 2 clips, one on each side, but one of those is missing, hence the need for that tape. Now, one thing I've noticed is that the screen doesn't really latch very well because the keyboard doesn't really fit in there properly because of that coiled cord. And because of that, you can see the screen doesn't actually stay closed, which means when you stand this up on its end, the screen can unfortunately flop open, and that means that the screen might be broken just from impact trauma of flopping open too many times. All right, so let's see if this thing actually powers up. I have the power cord connected to the back IEC mains input, and let's see what we get. I hear a hard drive spinning up, and we have something on the screen. I didn't mention that right here on the screen, there's a contrast, brightness, and probably an inversion control. There's a switch right here that I think if we switch, probably switches the screen and inverts it, and it does. You could just sort of see that there. Okay, I have no idea if the camera is picking up what's on screen there. Hopefully you're able to read it, but it says Stingray 3.4 VGA BIOS, copyright 1990, that's a Cirrus Logic thing. Phoenix 286 BIOS ROM, 3.10.09, 1989. Altima Systems Incorporated, so I guess there's the company name. We have a CMOS checksum error, of course, because there's a battery in here that's almost certainly gone. Diskette drive 1 seek failure, press F2 for setup utility. Let's see if we can get to the setup. We can. Yeah, the clock chip has lost power. Are we surprised about that at all? No. All right, well, I think we're gonna have to open this thing up. The hard drive does sound like it's spinning and working, but I have no idea if it's type 17. That was just the default here when I powered on the machine. I'm assuming this thing has 1 meg of RAM because there's 4 SIMs in there, so it has to have at least 1 megabyte, but it might have actually 4 megs total. But we're just gonna leave it just like this. It says here, push page up for page 2 of setup. We got some shadowing stuff available to us. That's kind of interesting because usually this is a 386 thing. As far as I'm aware, this is a 286, but maybe this is actually a 386 in here. We can actually do 0-8 states, and looks like we have just those 2 pages of setup. Okay. Press F10 for exit or escape to reboot. We'll hit F10. I hit Control Delete. Okay, we're getting 640K. Hopefully that's readable. The hard drive is freaking booting? What? Okay, that is shocking. It's really difficult to read the screen, and this is normal VGA. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna try to hook this thing up to the capture device so we can start capturing what we see on screen, so it's a little bit easier to see. Okay, so one of the problems I'm having right now is that the machine is not outputting any signal on the VGA connector. So there's probably a key combo you have to push to get this thing to switch. And I've pushed a bunch so far, like Control Alt and numbers and things like that. And so far, nothing has done anything. So here's an interesting one. If I hit Control, Shift, Alt, and L, the screen flashes. You could just kind of make that out, right? But yet nothing's displayed on an external screen. All right, you can see we have something on the capture device. Unfortunately, it's shifted over a little bit, but let's reboot because I did something that froze the computer. Okay, I think it's Control, Shift, Alt, C, maybe for CRT. All right, there we are. We're booted up into the system. All right, so I mentioned that this thing was a music workstation, but clearly doesn't look like it was used for that. Software demos, let's see what we have in there. Vernier software, charged particles, data monitor, frequency analysis. This is all very scientific here, obviously. This has nothing to do with music. Let's see if any of these work. Orbit, nope. Power amplifier, PAX, that did not work. Precision timer, Vernier software in Southwest 89th Street in Portland, Oregon, 97225. So this machine obviously belonged to that company. Are they still around? That's the question I have. Let's see what the phone says. Well, and that would be a yes. Same logo and everything. They have moved. Their new address is 13979 Southwest Milliken Way in Beaverton, Oregon. That is just over the hill from their old address on Southwest 89th Street. We can see a date on the bottom left corner of the screen. It says 10/21/1993. So this machine was being used at some point in 1993. And we have some kind of precision timer here. This is actually a scrolling list. Voltage plotter, temperature plotter. Do any of these things actually work? Yeah, look at this. This stuff's actually all functional here. EGA graphics, yes. So there's the temperature plotter application. I wonder if any of this stuff is even backed up. I definitely need to get the hard drive out of here so we can get all of the stuff off of this and save it. I am curious to see if charged particles works. That does not work. Data monitor, nope. It's possible like there was an extra hard drive or stuff had to be deleted at some point off this thing. Okay, so that was the software demos. What about EEPROM duplication? Maybe this computer was used for developing hardware or updating hardware. Error identification on hardware. Press Q to quit or enter to continue. I have a feeling that DB25 that's on the ISA card is almost certainly used for like an EEPROM programmer that would plug in. Although it's possible that the modular circuit technology programmer plugged in through the parallel port. Looks like this thing supports all sorts of different types of things. This is general EEPROM's 27C style, so all the way from 16 all the way up to the 8 meg version. And looking at the rest of this stuff, it's all pretty run-of-the-mill. These types of programmers for MS-DOS were relatively common, and it's not like they supported all sorts of weird and unusual things that you can't program today. I wouldn't be surprised if everything this thing can program actually can be programmed with a TL866 or the latest 3G version. So it's nothing particularly special about this. Of course, back in the day, programming EEPROMs required very expensive like data I/O hardware or other specialized hardware. So when you had a peripheral you could just plug into a regular PC, especially something that's portable like this, and get it to work, that was actually pretty cool. Disk duplication, duplicate 3.5-inch discs, all right. TI GraphLink. TI-82 and TI-85. Maybe they use that for demonstration purposes, or maybe this was used in educational context and these were used by their students. Looks like we have Microsoft Works 2.0 on here, and I think that's pretty much it. This is MenuWorks, that's the name of this entire menu program. Under System Setup, just allows you to set up the menus and whatnot. Exit to DOS, are you sure? Yep, there we are. Volume in drive C is RIP. No way. It has HDIR on here. That's a utility I use on my system when I boot it. I just typed it instinctively because it's easier to see what you're looking at. And it's freaking on this computer, version 2.0. I don't know what version I am running on my compact flash card, but yeah, it's a color-coded directory utility. That is so cool. So we're in a directory called pbrush. I think this is paintbrush. Let's just run this and see if paintbrush is actually working. Run paint. Oh yeah, sorry. Paint. No mouse detected. Yeah, well, I don't have everything plugged in. Oh, it won't run without a mouse. Rude. I just wanted to see what's in all these various directories around here. This is the whole point, right? aibdemo.exe. The AIB Toolkit demo, C version from 1983. Type of board, none. This looks like it's a hardware card for digital I/O and maybe analog I/O since it has output voltage there. We got AIB kit, which seems similar. AIB demo, yeah, it looks the same. There's a bin directory here, which has various utilities. I'm thinking like DOS utilities of some kind. The hot directory program is in here, hdir. VL, volume label, advanced editor. Press delete to remove the old label. Well, I just removed it. Whoops. We have Norton Utilities, system information. So we have a PCAT, Intel 286. The light for 16 megahertz is turned on the front of this thing, so we can assume it's actually running that fast. RenDir obviously renames directories. Remac, playback rate, samples per second. Speak.sound, weird. Turbo power software, so this just shows you what's going on. Hooked vectors, command lines. Utility by Bill Stewart called free, just shows you how much free space you have on your hard drive. Which incidentally, MS-DOS 4.01. DS, directory sort. df, it's like the df command on Unix. cshow, yep, we have CompuShow, so this is an image viewer. Not really sure if there's any pictures on this thing, but at least cshow is available. Is this in the path? Bin is in the path. Yes, we can run this stuff from anywhere. And then we have any PC, which I don't know what that does. Kind of hung the computer, so hopefully it's not erasing the hard drive. We'll just reboot that. Got to switch back to the external screen, so Control-Alt-Shift-C. I hit pause so we can see what's going on. HiMemSys is running. XMS driver not installed because no HiMem is found. That could be a BIOS problem if this thing does have 4 megs. Mirror version 7.1 by Central Point Software, another Portland company incidentally, creates an image of the system area. Okay. Mirror successful. There's a mouse driver that's not working by Logitech. Mouse is not responding. Oh, and I was too slow to catch the last one there. All right, we have the demo directory. I assume these are all these various demos that we saw in the menu. Yeah, stepper and stuff like that. Looks like we have MS-DOS 4.01 right there. There's a download directory, but it doesn't have anything in it. This EEPROM directory looks like the utilities for the EEPROM programmer. And there's 2 of them. Looks like just a different version. Yeah, it looks like there's just utilities for converting EEPROM files between like bin and hex files, stuff like that. We have a menu directory, which is almost certainly that menu program. It is indeed. There's a mouse directory, which is, yep, mouse tutor. This is a Logitech drivers. We have another version of PC Paintbrush. What are the date stamps on that? 1988, oh, all the way to 1995. I just grabbed myself a serial mouse. I have one sitting off to the side. I have no idea if this is Logitech compatible. Okay, and it plugged in. The mouse does seem to work. Let's run the DOS shell here. This is just part of MS-DOS, and yep, we can have a mouse pointer that does function properly. So now we can run PC Paintbrush here. Oh boy. So version 2.0, and we have a mouse pointer that does work. So let's load. So Paintbrush uses the PCX file format. Have you ever seen that? That comes from this program. And I think Paint 2 had a couple pictures in here. Oh yeah, look, we have some stuff in here. I mean, hopefully this is not something I have to blur out. Oh, that is really bad and hard to read. As difficult as this is to see, it does have their logo there. I figured there would be a way for me to change the color palette, but I can't seem to figure that out. I can adjust patterns, like clicking on the yellow here, double clicking, it just brings this up, which seems to allow me to draw patterns or something. And when we go to adjust palette, I'm not sure what this is supposed to do. Maybe it thinks we're stuck in like EGA mode or something like that. I'm not sure. Maybe we can run the PB setup utility and change the video card. Okay, I think I'm in the right section. We have various cards. So number 13, IBM Personal System 2, 64.480, 16 color. I'm assuming that's actually what we were running in already. So we'll try 13 just to make sure. Continue. Okay, let's try paint now. Now this looks, it looks basically identical here. All right, well, we'll try loading up something else here. Maybe it has better colors than the one that was all in yellow. I don't get what's happening here with these. It's really hard to see. Pasco Data Monitor by Vernier Software. They have exactly the same content. It's just this same exact thing here. All right, we have PC tools on the hard drive. This is a Central Point software, piece of software. I think that mirror thing we were seeing is exactly where this comes from. There's a shell we can run as well. Oh, although now I think about it, this looks like Norton Utilities. It has nothing to do with Central Point software. Yeah, this certainly looks like Norton Utilities to me. All right, so just as a little benchmark for this system, so it runs at 9.0 versus an IBM AT at 6 megahertz 2.7 or a PS2 Model 55SX. I'm assuming a 36SX. That's slower than this machine as well. So this thing is a relatively speedy piece of hardware for a portable computer. All right, and what about version here? Oh, it is Central Point software, PC shell. Okay, cool. Yep, Portland company. And I gotta admit, these utilities were really great for people who are MS-DOS users and didn't know how to use DOS that well. Just a graphical way to get their files managed and whatnot made things so much easier. PKWare would be PKZip, PKNzip. Procom, Program Plus, nothing special about that. That's a terminal emulation program for use with modems and things like that. SBI Kit, SBI Demo, Serial Box Demo. Well, we don't have this device connected to this machine and the mouse is using the serial port. So I can't do too much about that. Here's a directory called SBP. Let's run that. Serial Box Plotter. Oh, there it is, Vernier Software, MS-DOS version of the Serial Box Plotter. So this computer looks like it was used until around 1997. There's some 97 date stamps there. And that put this computer at 7 years of life, considering it came out in 1990 based on the sticker on the bottom. Not too bad, all things considered. And even though this machine is a little bit beat up, it still is operating perfectly. All right, we have TASM on here. Is this the Borland Turbo Assembler? Yes, it is. Borland Corporation Turbo Assembler. There's nothing particularly special about something like Turbo Assembler. It's easily available and you can find it online if you want to try that out yourself. Here is a program called T-Copy, licensed from Cydex, PAS software. Not sure what this is doing. Pass around turbo copy, copy format verified disk. This maybe is that disk duplication thing we saw there. Stores diskette images on your hard drive. This is kind of a hilarious program here. Read about pass around. My assumption is that this computer used by Vernier Software was brought around maybe to clients' offices to like show off these tools and programs. And then they used this machine to make quick disk copies of floppies to give to customers. And here's what turbo copy looks like. I went into the program itself. How many copies do you want to make? You can make up to 10,000 copies. We're going to make one copy. Insert master diskette. That's kind of interesting. That utility definitely might be worth saving. So when I image this whole hard drive, we'll get a copy of that. Here's a directory, TD201. The manual.doc file seems to indicate this is the turbo debugger. So it's part of Turbo Assembler. I guess this is a bunch of the various tests for their hardware that plugs into the computer here. What's funny is there are files called like sound.dir, but that's not actually a directory. That is actually a file that when you type it, it just lists what was on a disk, a floppy disk that is. Here's a directory called TF101, and there's a README. The Turbo Profiler. Probably has to do with the Turbo Assembler again. Here's a directory TP60. Is this Turbo Pascal? Turbo Pascal 6.0. Kind of feels like this computer was used for development work, doesn't it? With all these assemblers and compilers and stuff on here. We have a utility directory here with screen, stack, where is. Actually searches your whole hard drive for stuff. That's like the Unix find command. That would be a handy little utility. Stack, command line, editor, enhancer loaded. I don't know what these all do. These are TSRs, right? Screen, VGA controller utility, VGA locked. Oh, this is for Cirrus Logic. So this would be for the card that's built into this thing. Select CGA, select fast bandwidth. Interesting. So we were in slow mode. Switch to panel or screen. There we go. So this is actually utility from Cirrus Logic for doing this stuff. Allow 16-bit and force 8-bit operation. Very cool. 16-bit operation has been disabled because the PC bus interface is 8 bits. So we have a fast processor on this thing, but an 8-bit interface to the VGA card, that's kind of junk. Here's a program called QEdit. I guess it's a text editor of some kind. And this is a mouse tester, I guess. Yes, it is. Interesting. We have a Vernier directory here. It has a GA directory in it, which is empty. We have Works, which is obviously Microsoft Works. Don't really see any files that look like they were generated by this, so I assume it was never really used for much. And WPII. What is this? Unit 01. FM test? I don't know what this stuff is. eval-key.doc? Looks like, well, I tried to type the file, just had a bunch of junk in it, but it looks like this has something to do with education. Motion and force conceptual evaluation answer sheet. So this does seem like blank schoolwork. So I wonder if this company had training for using their tools, for instance, and this was some of the test materials. And perhaps if we open up Microsoft Works here, those files are accessible. So let's go back into that Unit 1 directory, FM tests, other files. I don't know. Nope, clearly this is not something that it understands. So don't know what generated those files. Well, and that appears to be it for what's on the hard drive of this thing. So it was used by this Vernier software here in Portland to test out or demo their various pieces of equipment that plugged into this thing. And potentially it was used for some education and maybe some software development as well. So sort of a jack of all trades machine used from around 1990 all the way up till about 1997, at least based on those date stamps. So what was I talking about at the beginning of this video when I said that this thing was used for music production? Why did I have that idea? Nothing on this machine really belies the fact this thing was used for any kind of music production. Well, the reason why I said that is I found an article about this computer from around 1990 talking about its use in music production. Let's go check it out. Let's first start with the FCC ID. It's ARF Altima. And it seems to be that this computer was made by Sampo Technology Corporation. And there's not a whole lot of information on this application about what this computer is exactly. Electro Service Corporation, last name Kokenias, P.O. Box 128, Belmont, California, 94002. So that's going to be up in the Bay Area. Looking down further, this thing is a laptop computer. It's under Part 15 Class B, computing device / personal computer. Now, that was the FCC ID ARF Altima, which is what's on the bottom of this computer. There's also ARF Altima 3, I suppose a third generation or something of this machine. The date on the original application was September 1989, and then the follow-up was like a year and a few months later, and that was for ARF Altima 3. And looking at the document for ARF Altima 3, Electro Service Corporation again, same P.O. box. And then the only difference is here it says laptop computer with one of each serial, parallel, and VGA video ports. Oh, and for the Ultima 3, 8036SX 8,16. So there was a follow-up with a faster processor. Going back to the original FCC ID, it does just say microprocessor number 16. Pretty generic. For the actual certificate, not a whole lot of new information other than it really confirms that this thing almost certainly was made by Sampo and the Electro Services Corp had something to do with it. Let's look this up. Searching for the address here doesn't really give us anything because this P.O. Box 128 is almost certainly at a post office, a U.S. post office that handles this zip code. And we can see there is Belmont, and if we zoom out, you can see where this is in respect to other things. There's Palo Alto and Fremont across the bay. Now in the search results, nothing really comes up for this company either, except for the grant itself, which matches the address that we already searched for. Another search of the address, though, brings up this, Thomas Kokenias Electro Service Corporation. We're back on the FCC's website again, Biomedical Monitoring Systems Incorporated. And it says that this is a Part 15 low-power communication device transmitter running at 900 megahertz. There's that company name again, Electro Service Corporation. And back on the FCC's website, we found another thing, and this one's from 1993, same company here, Electro Services Corporation, and we have another computer. This looks like a desktop computer. And you notice here, Aorta system sounds very much like it has something to do with the healthcare industry. So maybe this was a computer that was designed for use with healthcare. And not unlike this biomedical monitoring system. So I'm thinking now that this Electro Service Corporation was a service company to help these companies get through the FCC's red tape. And you would use them as consultants to help you out. And this actually confirms what we were finding, because if we look here, there's another thing that has the same service corporation here. There it is. And this is a Japanese company called General Research of Electronics Incorporated, or I think that's what it is. And I can't quite tell what this is, although this also runs at 900 megahertz, and it came from around 1991, original equipment. Now moving on to why I thought this thing was used for music production, here we are on the website musine.co.uk, which has an archive of an old scanned article here that basically goes over this computer. And there it is right there, the Altima One. And we can see a photo here. It looks a little bit different with the way the screen looks. And look how there's a little panel here with a little trap door. But this computer featured in this edition of the magazine is definitely the same exact computer that we're dealing with here. The only real difference is this says Mark II LX, and on the one that we have here it says Altima Two. And then of course the screen panel arrangement is different, with this machine having the screen centered and not having this little trap door. But the rest of this all looks the same. We have the exact same keyboard, the RAM access trap door there. And with the side view, there's the reset switch and the keyboard connector. And then we have a DB25 there as well, along with the same set of ports on the side, and that's the power switch. Now this particular computer, the Altima One, was marketed from Sound and Compute, and it sets to beat Yamaha its own game. How? By producing a lowish cost alternative. Ever since Yamaha introduced the C1 music computer based on the PC-AT spec, people over here in Europe seem to be taking the PC more seriously as a music machine. Although the PC is popular for music applications in the States, it never really taken off in Europe, and this may be changing. It seems that would make this computer useful to this music scene would be MIDI ports on the machine, like an MPU 401 card from Roland. The Altima One music system is based around a PC-AT compatible laptop, yeah, in quotes, that's for sure, personal computer with an LCD screen, 20 meg hard drive, and a processor clock speed of 16 megahertz. Has one MIDI in and one MIDI out port, an FSK synchronization connector, and an audio output from the metronome. The Altima One, at least the one with the music configuration, was 2,700 pounds, so I don't know what that is in this today. Oh, well, how handy is that? 7,200 pounds in today's money, so I would estimate around 10,000 US dollars. And that price includes an MPU 401 compatible interface card and the Sequencer Plus Mark I software. What you get for your money is a computer that's almost an inevitable import from the Far East. It has a fold-up liquid crystal display, detachable 101 keyboard, and a Voyetra V4001 MIDI interface. There's one external serial port as well as a standard parallel port and a printer port. The LCD screen can emulate either CGA or a monochrome display adapter, and it can drive an external monitor. The Voyetra V4001 MIDI card came installed. All you have to do is plug in the external metal box with 2 MIDI ports and 2 FSK sync phono sockets. The Altima has a built-in V22 modem, which is not approved, so cannot be used connected to the British Telecom network. Nudge, nudge, wink, wink. Very interesting that in 1990, that was still a thing. The tested machine had 1 meg of RAM with 640K as base memory and 384 as extended memory, or expanded. And it mentions the little trap door that lets you access those SIMs. It says this allows you to upgrade the internal memory to 8 megabytes, which is probably more than you'll ever need. I don't see how 8 megs is possible, other than it being able to take 2 4 meg modules to do that. Originally, this thing came with a nylon carry bag and a detachable shoulder strap, and the whole thing weighs in around 9 kilograms or 19 pounds. The reviewer goes on to say that this machine is one of the clearest displays they've ever seen on a laptop, and a reverse video switch is a great idea. One of the big problems with laptops, including the C1, that's the Yamaha one, has been the lack of contrast on the LCD. Definitely not a problem on the Altima. We have a picture of the keyboard, slightly ejected from the case, and yep, it looks exactly like it does on this one. And we have a picture of it running this music sequencing software, and it absolutely does look like it's running in CGA mode there, so the font looks a little blocky. That must have been the big change between this machine we have in the review and the one I have here, is the addition of the VGA monitor and VGA circuitry inside the machine. And the bottom line is I said that this computer is fine, and it's faster than the Yamaha one, and it does its job just fine. Now, what I didn't realize when I first found that review, because I hadn't really read it closely, I wanted to save that for when we were on camera just now, is that very clearly this machine was sold, well, to anyone who wanted it. And that company, C & Sound, I think it was, just bought this machine and then bundled it with that card, the ISA card, and the requisite software to run the card. And really, anyone could have just bought this machine or any other laptop and then bundled that card in there. So it's kind of funny that that review was talking about this computer like it was some kind of distinct thing, when the reality is it had nothing to do with the product. This machine was just available to be used in whatever capacity you needed it to work in. And I guess it's one saving grace compared to other laptops is that it has that one 8-bit ISA slot in there that allows you to add something like a MIDI interface that you wouldn't necessarily be able to do on other laptops. Now, from a timing perspective, we're talking around 1990 for this machine here. I have a Toshiba with a plasma screen in it. It's also a 286 with VGA, and that thing has, I think, 3 ISA slots in it. But I must admit that it's quite a lot larger than this thing. This thing is still really heavy, don't get me wrong. It's obviously very thick, and from a portability standpoint, I mean, it's portable, but it's not super portable. But if you think back to what PCs looked like in 1990, this thing was pretty small, and it would be easy to transport on an airplane. I mean, it'd be heavy to throw over your shoulder, but you could do it. And it was self-contained, and it would allow you to do, say, your MIDI production with that configuration there, or in the case of this thing, used for demos for that Vernier software, or maybe make some EEPROMs or copy some floppies for customers as well. All pretty useful stuff to have something that you could just throw over your shoulder. I could see the use case for this thing, even being as heavy as this thing is. Now, you may not be familiar with the Taiwanese company Sampo. Sampo was an OEM for a bunch of other companies. I think they made stuff and you didn't see their name printed on them. They had other names printed on it, but they did actually sell a line of electronics, consumer electronics that is, to consumers here in North America. So you might see Sampo branded televisions and VCRs and other things like that. Stuff with their own brand name wasn't super common. I mean, I guess just like this computer, it has this Altima brand and has nothing written about Sampo anywhere on it. But we can tell from the FCC grant, absolutely they were the manufacturers of this machine. So I think it might be time to actually disassemble this computer and see what we can see on the inside. Let's start with the bottom side, because this has some visible screws here, and we're just going to take these out, and hopefully this thing kind of pops apart. I noticed in this corner down here, there is a screw there, but the case is kind of coming apart. So I have a feeling that there might be a broken standoff in here. Now, earlier when we were doing the tour, I mentioned this flathead screw. Let's take this out. Let's see what that gives us access to, if anything. Wow, that's really stuck in there. Okay, and I notice here this little bracket is becoming loose. There we go, that comes out. So I think that has something to do with holding the card in. Let's see if we can pop this card out. So I guess you can install and remove the card without taking the bottom cover off. All right, so there's the ISA card that was installed in here, the SAC-101R. Almost certainly, this is going to be used for the EEPROM programmer. I know this has the same connector as a regular parallel port, but I've seen these cards before used with EEPROM programmers, MS-DOS programmers. QIC passed, made in Taiwan. Nothing really to give away exactly what this is. All right, with all those screws out, looks like the motherboard is attached to this bottom cover still. So it must be screwed into the cover, and then those screws actually go deeper down to standoffs that attaches to the rest of the machine. Fortunately, this is a case where the top-down camera doesn't have enough of a wide angle to capture all of this. But it looks like the top cover with the screen and the keyboard and whatnot has some connectors that connect to, say, the power supply there. And we have a little ground strap or something right here that's screwed on. There he is. Okay, I think everything is disconnected. So there it is. There is the inside of the Altima 2 or Altima One, whichever this actually is. And this is the top cover. So these are the cables that I disconnected. This was that ground strap. And then we have a couple of connectors here, JP5. And this looks like, I don't know, the LEDs probably that go under the screen. Now I'm noticing that this is loose in here and flopping around. I think this is part of the hinge mechanism. And this obviously snapped right off somewhere, and look, it's breaking more. I assume that screwed in right there, and that came off. The standoffs are gone. And clearly without this, the screen is not going to stay up on its own. and it's kind of flopping around. And I heard that banging around inside, and I was wondering what it is. Okay, there you go. Plastic hinges. They don't always last. From a construction standpoint, there's copious amounts of epoxy all around this thing. I guess, was this like a bodge to keep these from breaking off? I mean, they are still intact, so I guess it worked. But I see that all over the place here. It's there, there. And we also have some in the back here holding on these tall standoffs here and here. Maybe they should have put a little bit more around the hinge mechanism as well. I can see here the metal insert. See, notice it there? That brass insert missing. That's probably why that screw doesn't stay in anymore and that whole corner was kind of pulling apart. Now here we are looking at the guts of the machine. Obviously we have the video card right here. Let's get this off. This is the Cirrus Logic card. And almost certainly why the earlier version had CGA and MDA, and this one has VGA, because this is actually upgradable. And yes, if we flip this over, this has a Cirrus Logic chipset on it, connects to the motherboard here and here, and then this obviously goes to the video connector, which is probably replaceable. So you could either have a 9-pin for the CGA and MDA, or the HD15 for the VGA. And probably, as we saw in that utility for this, while we were booted into DOS, this thing probably has an 8-bit interface that connects to the motherboard. Looks like we've had some rework done over there as well. See all that flux residue around these chips? Here's the ISA connector, which appears to be some kind of a right angle thing, because the card, remember, plugged in parallel to the motherboard. I don't think I've seen one of those. I'm going to say that we already have 1 meg of memory right on the motherboard here. These look like 256K chips, so 2 of those is 256K by 8-bit. We have a parity RAM chip, so 1 megabyte total. And if we take a look at this RAM that's in there, that's also 256K, so it looks like this computer has 2 megabytes of RAM installed right now, and you could easily put 4 megabytes on the motherboard plus this, so that would give you that 5 megs total. The only way I could ever see you getting 8 megs total is if this memory that was soldered onto the board was actually 4 megabytes, and that this was an additional 4 megabytes. Now moving on, the hard drive is mounted right under here and it has this interface here, so it's obviously IDE. That's kind of handy. Floppy drive is connected over here, a standard 34-pin affair. Looks like we have a battery right here. This is the sealed ones that don't generally leak, so that's awesome. A 3.6 volt high energy lithium type battery. I think that's actually the speaker connection, because I wouldn't be surprised if this is the battery connection, because there's the clock crystal right there, right by the chipset. Probably has integrated clock circuitry. And indeed, if I yank on this, notice that's moving over there. So that tells us that that absolutely is the connection for the battery. Cut the wires here on this battery. We do need to get this out of here because they can leak, so we don't want to leave that in there. Now this is the modem module right here. It's underneath the motherboard and it actually has this cable here that connects down. So that's an optional configuration that might not be installed. You might have those blanks there to block off those ports. I want to get the hard drive out of this thing, and to do that, we're going to need to get this connector off for the modem. So we'll slide this off if there's room. The reason why is the screw there for the drive cage is underneath the cable. The power supply, it's pretty much standard switch mode affair. It's just very compact and really shoved into here, so there's not a lot of room. Removing the hard drive, standard connection there, but unusually it's got, look at this power connector. I've seen drives in the past with this little connector there for the power, and I've just never seen anyone use it. Usually they use the full-size one, which this does have. This looks like a Connor hard drive. We'll know when we flip it over. Taking a look at the power supply on the back, serviceability, okay, I guess. Definitely trying to replace this thing with something else might not be super easy. There's just not a lot of room. Pico ATX would probably fit in here though. You just have to figure out all these custom cables here that connect down to the motherboard. And you can see here that what I thought was the battery connector for an external battery, I'm pretty sure is the case, because it plugs into the power supply right there, and it probably allows it to be charged by this, and then also power up the machine when you are not running on mains. For the BIOS, we do have Phoenix Altima branded BIOS, and then we obviously have space for the Mathco processor. And the 16 megahertz CPU is almost certainly a Harris part. You can just see the A sticking through there. And these are the ones that typically run at those faster speeds. Nice they have this little hold down mechanism to hold that PLCC chip into that socket, because this machine might obviously get banged around and you don't want your CPU falling out and floating around inside the computer, like the hinge for the screen. We do have some broken bits of the case right here, obviously where it suffered an impact, but All things considered, the glue they put down on this actually did the trick and held this thing together. And I wanted to show that right here, the video connector absolutely is connected just to this ribbon cable, so it can be swapped out with whatever type of video circuitry that you have in mind. And the hard drive is a Connor CP3044. And for anyone who's curious, floppy drive is a TIAC FD235HF. All right, I'm plugging this thing into my Windows 10 machine using this USB IDE adapter here, and it's doing this thing where it's just constantly making the USB inserted sound. You can hear it there. I'm gonna turn the power off to the drive. That's typically a problem when you have the jumper set wrong on the drive itself. This seems to be configured for single drive right now. ACT is jumpered and C and D. It says if it's primary, switch this to DSP and C and D. We're not actually getting anything now, so it's actually acting worse. Oh, we just had the insertion sound. But I think it's still not working. I've been having a lot of trouble with this cables to go adapter here. Yep, okay, no diff. I'm having a really difficult time accessing this hard drive. When I booted up my system using the XT IDE card, when I went to the hard drive, it was just garbage. It didn't show anything at all. So now I have it connected to this 36SX with a floppy drive. I booted the floppy drive, and let's see if I can even read the C drive at all. No. Now I'm using type 17 in the BIOS, which I think is exactly what it was set to on the other machine. But let's actually type it in based on the actual parameters of the drive. I really don't think this will make any difference because the only difference is it was 977 cylinders versus 980. If I remove the boot disk, I heard it like try to access the hard drive, just like a little blip of something, and then that was that. And from a jumper configuration, I have this set back to single drive, which is how we're configured here. We just have one cable. The only thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna connect the power from the power supply for the bench computer here up to the hard drive. I was using my little external power supply brick. Let's see if this makes any difference. Nothing at all. It's currently trying to access the hard drive. The LED is on. It's just this pink light right here on this controller card is the hard drive access light. It's just solid on. Okay, and now the drive is spinning up and spinning down. That's not reassuring. Let's unplug the interface cable and let me run it sitting on the bench in the orientation it was inside the machine. Yeah, it just spun right down again. That is not good. I wonder if it could have been that this hard drive was on its last legs and we just happened to get it running and saw what was on here and now it's bit the bullet. Let's try going back to my little power supply here. Same thing. Wow. It sounded like it was about to start seeking the heads and then the drive spun down. I wonder if the heads got stuck somehow. Just banging on it the side a little bit. There we go. The heads were making their normal sound there. So percussive maintenance did the trick. Let's hook this all back up again and see if I can get this drive to live long enough to just get us to read it so we can copy it off. Okay, here we go. Are we gonna hear the head seek sounds or what? Okay, we're back hooked up. Normal head seek sounds. But we are exactly where we were before, where it's not spinning up and down, but it's not reading. I'm gonna hook it directly up to an XT IDE card. Let's see if that makes a difference. Now, incidentally, when I was just using this earlier with the XT IDE card, with this compact flash card, it was seeing the hard drive. It did say Connor and the model number and everything. So it's talking to the drive. That's not talking to the drive there though. I'm gonna try a different cable now. These are the trials and tribulations when you try to get these old drives working. They are so old, they just are fussy. Okay, how about the new cable? It's kind of working, right? It says peripheral, like you know it's saying peripherals there, but no, not quite. All right, the drive is plugged back into the IDE card, and what I'm gonna do is plug in one of these XT IDE ROM cards here. So this will allow the system to auto-detect the hard drive. It basically will replace the BIOS routines where I have to type a hard drive type in, and let's see if this card can talk to this hard drive through this cable. So with this ROM installed, oh look, Connor peripherals. Right, so this is what it was doing before, missing operating system. And let's try booting off this floppy drive here. I bet you it's not going to be able to see the C drive. And I bet you the C drive, yes, it's just garbage. That's exactly how it looked last time when I actually booted off of this card using the DOS that was on this compact flash card. So I've gone back to my compact flash card with the XT IDE, and I'm going to reconfigure this card here so that it actually can talk to both the 16-bit ISA controller that's in the motherboard here, plus the XT IDE card. So to do that, we change it from one controller to two controllers, and we set up the secondary controller here. And device type, yeah, 16-bit ISA is exactly what this is. And I think this needs to be 140 and 340. Now I'm wondering if the issue is some of this stuff in here. I'm under the primary IDE device. Let's turn off block mode transfers, and then let's fiddle with the settings in here. So I'm going to try normal for CHS translation method. Looks like we can actually specify the heads and cylinders manually as well. So 977, heads were 5, and sectors per track was 17. Let's try those settings. We'll just flash this back into the card, and we'll reboot the system. I think I have the base I/O of the IDE card correct, but maybe I don't. Okay, I do not. Okay, I realize the problem is the address is 1F0 and 3F0. So that wasn't gonna work the way it was. For whatever reason, when you add a second IDE card for this configuration utility, it picks 170, which is the secondary address, even though there's only one of these cards configured in here. All right, let's try that. All right, shows Connor peripherals, that's a start. Okay, it booted off the compact flash card. Oh, that's it. That is it. We are definitely looking at the contents of the hard drive. So that was it. I just had to turn off that addressing mode. I guess it was trying to do some sector translation, which was causing those issues. Okay, I'm going to use Xcopy from the D drive, everything, and I'm using /E, which is create all subdirectories or copy all subdirectories, including empty ones. And we hit enter, and this should go for a while and copy everything onto my compact flash card. I have plenty of space on there to hold the contents of this entire hard drive. Now, while this is copying, it's interesting that this drive was not working connected directly to my XT IDE card. There must be an issue with the buffers I'm using for the IDE connector there that are incompatible with this card, but they work with compact flash cards. And this old 16-bit ISA card here, which is connected through the ribbon cable, is working. So that's just a little idiosyncrasy you have to be aware of. And maybe that's the same problem that was affecting that USB adapter I had plugged into this thing. And I think we just got lucky too, because this drive obviously is dying because the heads weren't seeking properly. It was spinning up and down, and doing a little percussive maintenance, it got it working. It's happily copying away right now. All right, we're finished copying, but before I shut this machine down, if I don't take away that manual settings here, I'm gonna forget about it, and then I'm gonna be very confused why my XT IDE is not working with an external hard drive. So user specified, I'm gonna say no. And to be honest, I'm gonna leave this set to normal, since it's most likely I'm gonna plug in old hard drives like this to my XT IDE for copying files off like we just did. So I'm gonna leave it set to normal, and the block transfers off, and hopefully that makes this compatible with other old hard drives. I am kind of curious, actually rebooting, will this work without those manually specified heads and cylinders? Let's see. Nope, it does not work. So I had to specify the heads and cylinders manually, and I used the same ones from that Type 17 in the BIOS for it to actually work. Because there we are with that garbage again, even though it's set to normal mode for the translation method. Okay, I think this thing is back together. I don't have the screws in the bottom, but it should be operational. Let's open up the screen. I'll slide this down so you can hopefully see there's some activity when I power it on. Here we go, 3, 2, 1. Okay, we have normal LEDs. Oh, there we go. It's freaking working. Yep, CMOS error, of course. Please run the setup program. Control-Alt-Shift-C. There we go. Let's reboot. I'm going to put a floppy disk in here. We haven't even tested the disk drive. Oh, went back to the... Oh, the disk drive does not sound happy at all. Interesting. Okay, well, it's a standard, yeah, it's booting off the hard drive. Well, the drive is no longer good, but it is a standard TAC drive, just like this. They just have the faceplate removed because the faceplate for the floppy drive is actually in the top lid. So I could replace it with this drive, but you know what? I'm not gonna bother. This thing doesn't really need a working floppy drive, and it is easy enough to replace once you take this whole thing apart again. But the computer is back together and fully operational again. All right, well, I think that's all there is to really say about the Altima laptop. This was a period of time for laptops that I really didn't like. I feel that all the laptops that existed around the time period when this was made, so 1990, were extremely compromised machines. They were much more expensive than desktop computers, and they were much slower and had much lower specs. The fact this thing was only a 286 16 megahertz, yeah, it was pretty speedy for what it was, but compared to desktop computers, this thing would have been way underperforming. But in 1990, we hadn't yet got to the point where they had been able to miniaturize everything to make this thing start to become light, meaning it has a big full-size power supply, full-size hard drive, full-size floppy drive. It took a few more years before they finally started to shrink that stuff down and you started to get actual small laptop computers. But that doesn't take away from the fact that even those early notebook computers that came after this, that were truly transportable, were not still compromised with terrible screens and much slower performance than you would get from a desktop computer. It wasn't until much more recently that we started to get laptops that were just as powerful as desktop computers, where you weren't really compromising by picking a laptop over a desktop computer. So with this computer specifically, it just feels like this whole thing was really cheaply made as well, especially with all that epoxy we saw on the inside and the whole janky design with this handle and the way the keyboard connects. It all doesn't seem very well thought out. At least this machine seemed to have served its purpose though, and the people that were using it clearly got lots of use out of it. It's all beat up and it was in use for about 7 years, hopefully helping them service their customers and do training and whatever else this thing was used for. So yeah, if anyone ever saw these things in operation and use out there in the world, or maybe saw these advertised, or you thought about buying one of these, I'd love to hear about it because I had never heard of this Altima brand ever before seeing this particular computer. And the only thing I could find with a quick Google search was that music article about the music version of this computer. So that's going to be it for this PC Archeology episode. If you liked it, I'd appreciate a thumbs up, but if you didn't, you know what to do. And thanks to my patrons, their names are scrolled on the side of the screen. They make it all possible I do this full time, and you know, all the other usual YouTube junk. And that's going to be that. So stay healthy, stay safe, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.